Chapter 5. Upstairs, Sky stepped out of the shower and dried himself off. He peeked out of the bathroom into the hallway as he wrapped the towel around his hips, satisfied there was no one to see him, and made a dash for the room he had been given. 2 doors down from his, the door was slightly ajar, and he could hear voices inside, women arranging furnishings.
No, you have to hang outfits together. The poor thing is blind. It's not like she can make sure her skirt and top matches. Everything has to be put in the same place every time. I'll not have her inadvertently pairing that lovely plaid skirt I found for her with a striped blouse.
He slipped past, taking note of which room they were in. He decided he was not ready to confront her yet. When he was dressed, he would wait until they left and slip the pack into her room. He darted into his own as one of the women's voices got closer to the hallway, closing his door just in time. He laid his bloody bundle onto the seat of a wooden chair and looked over the new clothes laid out on the bed for him. There was a plain linen kilt shirt of a lighter fabric than his own, perfect for the unaccustomed southern heat. It was not new, but still serviceable, and of a size that should fit, which surprised him. It was freshly laundered, though smelling it, he thought he caught the hint of griffin embedded in the fibers. The kilt was a standard black-watch tartan with a well-worn but cared-for broad leather belt. There was an absence of other things on the bed, for which he was kind of pleased. He would have felt awkward. There were socks and a pair of brogues on the floor at the edge of the bed. He threw the towel over the back of the chair and proceeded to dress. The clothes fit comfortably. The shirt turned out to be a little loose, but it would do until his own could be cleaned and mended. Feeling very much refreshed, he ran his fingers through his hair, pulling back his long, dark locks. He was a little annoyed by the curls at the end, but he was unwilling to chop them off. At least just yet. Satisfied with his toilet, he grabbed the rucksack and left his room. The door was closed when he got to it, and he paused to listen. He heard nothing from within and took hold of the knob. He took a moment to gather his courage before turning it. Somehow he could face down raging monsters and vicious macaw without flinching, yet he quailed at the thought of entering a lady's room. Satisfied there was no one within, he turned the small brass knob and stepped in. The room was very similar to his own, just dressed differently. It was small and simple, all the furniture against the walls, though it was clear from impressions in the ancient rug that this had not always been the case. There was a simple desk with 2 very large and awkward-looking books with thick pages that did not lay flush with one another. The 2 chairs in the room, one at the desk and one at the small dressing table, were the same plain wooden style as his own, save for the fluffy chintz cushions tied to the seats. The bed was a modest affair, with a white eyelet-edged coverlet. The windows were open, and a breeze flowed into the room through light, airy curtains. Heavier drapes were tied back on the sides of the same chintz pattern as the cushions, for modesty in the evenings. It was a very feminine room. He started to set the bag on the desk, then thought it possible she might not find it for days. It was better to put it on the bed. He started to set it up by the pillows, and then noticed how shabby and filthy the ruck itself had gotten. There was no way he could set it on the white spread. But he couldn't set it elsewhere without risking her not finding it, nor did he dare move the furniture which she might, by now, have memorized. Again, he gathered faltering courage, set the bag on the desk, and forced himself to do something he would otherwise have never dared. He opened the bag and breathed a sigh of relief to find the contents individually wrapped. He pulled out the first package. As he drew it forth, it seemed too large to have fit in the bag. But then, these were Fae things, and sense didn't come into them, or so he told himself. He set what felt like a cloak wrapped around a bundle of clothing just down from her pillow, and went back to the desk for the last thing in the ruck. This felt heavier, was wrapped in a coarse leather scrap that fell away as he pulled the object out of the bag. It was an ornately carved, rectangular wooden box about 8 inches on a side. The wood was dark and glossy, lovingly oiled and polished, and the carvings were deep and intricate. There was knotwork all around the edges, and a tangle of bramble and roses throughout. Hidden in corners were animals, a fox on one side, a unicorn in a corner, a griffin in another. The center was a triquetra. It felt weird in his hands. He could tell the wood was heavy, but had the feeling it was hollow, empty. It felt light inside and heavy outside, and he could not wrap his brain around the idea. He quickly set it on the bed next to the cloaked bundle, took the bag, and quickly abandoned the room. He felt like a thief slipping out into the hall, found he was beginning to sweat a little. He took the ruck back to his room and laid it with his laundry and headed downstairs where he could smell an abundance of food. Gabrielle, the old queen, was helping Anne at the buffet table when the stragglers began coming in. Anne found her pleasant and amiable and insisted she name everything in both Irish and English. She was trying very hard to remember the language, but it was being stubborn like everything else. And, like everything else, it came easier when she wasn't thinking about it. Some of the incoming people were ones Gabby knew well, and she asked some rather impertinent questions of a pair of young women over a tray of what she called biscuits, but felt and tasted more like bland scones. But then she could be remembering wrong. It had been a very long time since she had had a proper biscuit.
"Well, you Madge,"
growled Gabby good-naturedly at Liberty.
"did you do your duty?"
Anne understood most of that, though the word Madge confused her, and the rest she pieced together. There was a touch of embarrassment in the young woman's response.
"I have."
Anne felt an elbow graze her and guessed Gabby had put a hand on her hip and was glaring.
"Which half?"
she demanded. There was a tone of self-justification in the light voice.
"I was only mostly drunk."
This was followed by a giggle from a third party, also feminine. The voice continued.
"So how's your friend? She's new."
Gabby shifted to Irish immediately.
"This is Anne Kilbrin. She came out last night. So far she's only got a rudimentary grasp of English, but we're working on it. Anne, this is roulette,"
she said, turning her away from the first voice. A hand slipped into hers, gave her a light shock.
"Sorry."
The Irish was fair, but the accent odd, the hint of multiple languages leaking through. "It's all right. Pleased," Anne answered demurely.
"And this is Ian's daughter, Liberty O'Keefe. She's the new queen of the Greenwood."
Anne flushed, curtsied. Roulette giggled and was popped from the sound of things. Hands were immediately on Anne's arms, pulling her up.
"Oi, enough with that nonsense. Did no one explain matters to you?"
"'Tis a ritual thing, no more. You're in America, lass. We take less stock in that like here."
"You're more than just a ritual queen,"
Gabby warned. Liberty growled. "Aye, but don't let's confuse the girl," she turned back to Anne. "Outside of the rites, we do not observe the proprieties. You ken?" It was hard to reconcile her upbringing to it, but Anne nodded. I ken. Good, I'm just plain old Liberty, especially today." Gabby led her towards a table where they all sat down. Apparently, Celaine had joined them, but had remained surprisingly quiet until now. "I don't think ever want Queen to be, especially on Midsummer or Yule, to suffer attentions of whatever king. Lucky you, Henry is your cousin. You didn't have to, you know." Gabby laughed. "It's not a requirement, really, just highly recommended." Celaine persisted. "Yeah, but Henry? Ew!" She audibly shuddered, shoveling food in her mouth. Anne flushed as she realized what they were discussing. She was entirely unsure if they were in mixed company, but it was clearly not a subject for a dining table.
"Henry's not bad when he's got his mind on it," Gabby replied. Roulette laughed. "And when he's not?"
Anne felt the shrug and heard a hint of a grin.
"At least he's quick."
The girls laughed, and Anne, embarrassed, concentrated on finding the food on her plate and trying to eat without making a mess of things. From down and across the table came the deep voice from last night.
"Oi! My antlers is burning!"
Henry bellowed, which only served to dissolve the girls into further peals of laughter. Anne could not help joining them.
"Then dunk your head!"
Gabby shouted back. There was a huff and a stomp, and then no more of it. She heard his voice going further down the table. Anne listened to the girls talking, chimed in where appropriate, not used to joining in. People were still coming in and going out, some bringing more food, others drinks. Someone passed near them, hesitated a brief second before apparently deciding on the better part of valor. Anne smiled. Most men she had known would avoid a gaggle of hens at a table when there were other options. Before she could wonder how she'd known it was a man, Celaine had leaned in and asked her, "Have you ever seen man on kilt?" Anne swallowed her tea, now blissfully cool. "Aye, though it seems a silly practice to me. Impractical, but I'll not judge. The Scots are fond of them, and even some Englishmen, if I remember. We'd tartans and kilts in Ireland, but they were more a formal thing." "I like it," she confided, obviously lusting after whoever had passed wearing one. Ann's voice became more stern. You're a mite young to be admiring... She stopped herself, sighed. No, you're not. But mind you, lass, there's more to a man than the shape of his legs. Though how he tends his body will tell you a lot about him. Same goes for young women, too, so bear that in mind each morning. Good advice, Gabby added to the girl. You're a bit young to be chasing that skirt, though. Who was that? Liberty asked. I've not seen him before yesterday. Roulette answered. I think he came out last night. I gave him a right crack in the grand melee, but while I rang his bell, he kept coming. He's got quite an arm on him. Threw Charlie McIver halfway across the field. There was a low whistle. He's no lightweight, Gabby murmured. He was covered in blood by the time he got to me, Liberty said, her voice soft and musing. Some not his own. Did he break the rules or enter the fray like that? Started that, Helene said. Got peek of him before fighting was bloody then. Sleeve cut. Anne wiped her napkin across her brow and dabbed at her throat above the high collar of her blouse. With the sun almost directly overhead, the heat was bearing down upon her. The air was thick with moisture. She was beginning to feel a little faint. Oh, good Lord, lass, you're fading in the heat, exclaimed Liberty, noticing her start to sway. I'm fine, she insisted, straightening her back. I'm just not used to the temperature. Thankfully, it's midsummer and shouldn't get any warmer. There was a moment of silence. This is just the beginning. It's going to get hotter, Roulette said. And more humid, Gabby added. Why don't you put on something cooler? No one offered you a change of clothes yet? Liberty asked. I've not asked. I don't wish to be a burden. You won't unless you faint a heat stroke. Roulette, you get the other side, Liberty ordered. Anne found herself lifted from the bench and aided to walk across the lawn back to the house. She tried to protest. I'll get used to it, really. I just need time. Aye. Where'd you come from? The bitch, the king, or some other? She asked, every inch the queen without meaning to be. Ireland, was her instinctual response. But I served at the gates of Tir na Nog. The king, Liberty sighed. At least it wasn't the bitch, Roulette commented. After ice and snow, it would have taken forever to acclimate her. Did you also serve the king? Anne asked. Liberty shook her head. No, love. We weren't that lucky. The women ushered her into the house and up the stairs, sat her in a chair in an unfamiliar room. It smelled different, like spice roses and feathers, a touch of lily and wisteria. There was more of a breeze than in her own room, and she could hear Roulette opening up glass doors which must lead out onto a veranda or a balcony. Liberty opened a wardrobe and began pushing aside hangers. Ooh, I like that one, Roulette exclaimed at something Liberty had pulled out. You never wear it anymore, and that makes me sad. It's a little snug in certain places, Liberty complained pointedly, but I think it'll fit her. She's more modest in the bust, and the color will complement that honey brown hair of hers. The dress was pressed into her hands, and Anne tried to feel the contours of it. There wasn't much to it. There were no buttons or laces, but a strange metal thing that ran up the back. What she could feel of the bodice was low-cut and vest-like. She couldn't be sure of the length of the skirt. Where is the rest of it? Or is this the chemise? The two stopped. Roulette began, trying to understand. That's the whole dress? No sleeves. A bare throat, she flushed. It's a formal gown, then? I couldn't wear it for a day dress. Roulette started to laugh and cut herself off. Liberty came to the rescue. It's too hot for what you're wearing. We wear shorts and sleeveless tops all the time. Oh, I couldn't. You'll die a heat stroke an you don't. I'd die of embarrassment first. It's not modest. Times have moved on, sweetie, Roulette began. It's perfectly acceptable to show a little skin. Or a lot. Women go to the beach wearing bathing suits that barely cover their naughty bits, and no one thinks anything of it. Anne crossed her arms. I would. We don't have to push you that far that fast, Liberty said. Her tone gave Anne the impression she was glaring at her friend. But you can't go around this summer wearing wool skirts to the floor and high collars and long sleeves, fairy cloth or no. You'll not survive. I'd feel more uncomfortable exposed, Anne explained. Thinner fabrics? Roulette offered. Might work, Liberty conceded. Do the sleeves have to be solid? If we get you somewhat gauzy? Anne thought about it. So long as the bodice is solid, the throat and sleeves can be sheer. Aye, I'll agree to that. Liberty hit the wardrobe again, handed something off to Roulette, who laid it on the bed. Here, let's get you out of this heavy linen, Roulette began, offering to help Anne out of the laced vest. Anne stood. Oh, I can manage, thank you kind. Her fingers flew through the laces, slipping off the vest and passing it to Roulette. I'll want to keep that, though. I'm fond o' it. Of course, Roulette exclaimed, folding it up. You'll need it come winter. Anne passed her blouse over, and the woman sighed with envy. This embroidery's beautiful. The fabric's so fine, but clearly for more temperate weather. Oh, good Lord, cried Liberty. Roulette turned. What? Oh, Suddenly self-conscious and uncertain, Anne's arms went up to cover her now naked torso. What is wrong? Am I being indecent? There are only the three of us, aye? Liberty crossed the room. It's not that, love. There's no bra or corset on ye. And with your level of modesty, I expected one or t'other. From the look of her, she's never worn a corset in her life, Roulette mused, admiring. Leastwise, not one for its original purpose. Just natural curves. Anne blushed. We couldn't afford one, and the nuns frowned on 'em. 'Tis what the bodice is for. What is a bra? Don't worry, we'll get you some. A silky-feeling blouse was placed in her hands, and Roulette helped her to find a way into it. It slid down over her skin like the coarser silks she had worn. Where? When? It was finer than anything she'd had as a young woman, with the exception of what she had just taken off. She sat down, trying to wrap her mind around the contradiction. She felt hands on her, but did not seem to notice them or what they were doing. She remembered two lives, and they contradicted each other in every way. Hardship and hard edges and coarse textures and sorrow. And on the other hand, softness and green things and cool hours and contentment. She'd worked hard, but had loved every minute of it. Her hands remembered the feel of three heads beneath them, the silk of the gilded hair and the lilt of their golden voices. She felt love and loss, regret and grief that threatened to overwhelm her until she remembered she was in the presence of strangers. Liberty, she's wearing wool stockings. Most of those English words filtered through understood. She pulled herself together sharply, wiped at her dry eyes, and reassessed what was going on. One of them had fastened a bodice around her torso, and the breeze from the window, though warm, slipped through the fabric of her sleeves as if it wasn't there. Oh, this won't do at all. Why are you wearing granny boots and wool stockings? Liberty clucked. So no one can see my legs. Why else? Something hit the bed behind her. Liberty sighed. All right, I'll make some concessions here, but you'll have to make some too. I'll find you thin blouses, lightweight vests, get you some bras that fit proper. I'll leave you the ankle skirts. They are back in style now, Roulette nodded. But you have to give up the stockings. At least for the summer. Anne slowly nodded. Fine, but won't the boots be uncomfortable without them? Can I get you in less confining shoes? In a peasant-length skirt, Anne countered. Liberty sighed. They make short socks now. I'll get you them too. Roulette, be a love and call for my car. We're going shopping.